Martinez, the new managing partner for our office here in Columbus. Not only is this meeting fun, but it's very efficient, and I love the efficiency of that board resolution as well. So nice job. Plant Moran has served as a forum sponsor for several years. We also serve as the external auditors of CMC. We really believe in giving back to the community. We really appreciate all the great work that Jane, that you and your team does for the community and helping with all these different variety of topics. I've attended a number of luncheons myself over the years and have thoroughly enjoyed them. So thank you very much for all that you do for us. To keep on with the theme of efficiency, we'll move on to start the program. No role in our state is more visible than the office of the governor, and perhaps no role is more lasting and respected. CMC is pleased and honored to have two of the state's former governors with us this evening. We also want to recognize that we have two First Ladies with us as well, Hope Taft and Frances Strickland. So please join me in welcoming them. And now with us on the stage, the Honorable Robert Taft, who served as governor. The Honorable Bob Taft, who served as governor from 1999 to 2007, and the Honorable Ted Strickland, who served from 2007 to 2011. And also our host, Colleen Marshall, CMC board member and co-anchor of WCMH NBC4. Colleen, take it away.
Thank you so much. We are looking forward to a freewheeling conversation, and Governor Strickland said just a few minutes ago when I interviewed him over there, what he likes about being a retired governor is he can speak his mind and he doesn't care what anybody thinks. So we're in for a good night. And I think as we talk about politics past, current, and future, I speak for everyone when I say to these two veteran leaders, what is going on right now? How do you describe the characteristics that you are seeing in Washington, at the State House, and the tenor and tone of the national political conversation? I'll start with you, Governor Taft.
I teach a course at the University of Dayton about the U.S. Congress, and where I never wanted to go, by the way. But it is extraordinarily divisive up there at that level of government. It's very polarized in Washington. It reflects the polarization of the country, the big sort to some extent, where people choose to live, and then, of course, all the different media channels that really appeal to the left or the right, very, very narrow casting, and that's the economic incentives that exist. It starts, I think, at the top. We have a president that I like some of the things he's done. I don't like other things he's done, but obviously divisive. And I'm not saying a president can solve this problem. We were pretty divided even before under the two prior presidents. But we need to work at it. I think the lower you get in government, at the local level, it's working a lot better, even at the state level. There's a lot of bipartisan activity here in state government, and people do talk to each other. It is a smaller world, and I think there is a sense that they can get things done working together, as Ted and I did when we served as governor. But I don't have a magic bullet for the national situation. We got to start in the schools, we got to start in the colleges, and we got to start with ourselves being willing to talk and sit down with other people, reach out to those with whom we disagree, and have civil conversations. And
Governor Strickland, you spent time, of course, on Capitol Hill, a number of terms that you served in Congress. Have you ever seen anything in our lifetimes quite like this?
The short answer is no. But you ask about how I thought about the current climate, and I was a psychologist before I became a politician, and I thought I knew something about human behavior. Watching what's happening now, I am questioning my own prior assumptions. But let me say that this is my concern, and my concern is this. There is an anger and a hostility throughout our country, and President Trump is not totally responsible. I think he is partly responsible, but the concern I have is this. I'm wondering if the president just hasn't made it acceptable for people to express opinions and views that they have harbored, but heretofore were not socially acceptable. And if that's the case, then that is very troubling to me, because it says something about our country. And that's, that's troubling. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Bob, if you have an answer, I'll be happy to hear it. But there is a meanness and an anger and an intolerance that I think is harmful to our democracy. I believe America's going to survive. Our democracy will survive. But we're going through a very troubling period, I believe.
It's almost easy for Democrats, let's say, who are running for president, to target Donald Trump, to make him, as you said, the focus of the ire. He's the tweeter. He's the one who has brought out the anger. But there's also a role for Republicans to make in all of this. And, who's responsible for bringing moderation back? It's easy to stand on the sidelines and point and say, that guy's the problem, or MSNBC's the problem, or Fox is the problem. Yeah. Who's responsible for bringing back civility and moderation and a willingness to reach across the aisle and work with someone? Whose job is this at this point?
I was talking before the program with someone about the fact that Senator Portman and Senator Brown, Republican and Democrat, are working together on infrastructure, which is an issue that has been totally unaddressed by our country. But I'm not sure they can do it all by themselves. There's a lot of bipartisan work in Congress that you never hear about, but on the big issues like immigration and trade, or some of these issues, we seem to be so divided, and you need the president to get something done. You can have bipartisanship in Congress, that's not enough.
Whose job is it to stand up to the president? Whose job is it to say to the president, what you're doing is wrong? Or whose job is it to say to the president, we can do this a better way?
Well, you're talking about 2020, the election.
So it's our job.
That's number one, it's our job right there. In the meantime, hopefully the people who are working with the president, hopefully members of Congress, will work to persuade him, especially perhaps Republican members of Congress, but also Democrats, about the need to work together to solve some of these problems that, I think it's just tragic that we have not solved immigration reform. Year after year, we almost got there. It died because of, partisanship. That was before President Trump, by the way. But our country, Ohio, we need to solve that problem.
Yes, in fact, anyone who knows me knows that I'm not a cheerleader for Donald Trump. But let me say that I don't think we can blame Donald Trump for everything that we're seeing happening in our country. He's one person. He is the president. He has a lot of influence. But I repeat myself. I think Donald Trump has revealed something about us, all of us, and our willingness to stand up for what we believe is right and ethical and honorable. And so what's going to save the country is for the people to say, we're better than this. We're better than the chaos that's happening on a daily basis. I wake up every morning. Frances is an early riser. She gets up before I do. I go down to the kitchen and I say to her, okay, what's happened? Because I know something has happened, It's a daily occurrence. And I think the people of this country are puzzled and confused and frustrated. And speaking of the media, I don't think people know where to go to for the truth, because they're just being bombarded from various outlets. So for the average person who's living their lives and trying to do their job and take care of their families and contribute to their communities, and they're not caught up in this the way we may be, I think it's a confusing time for people.
Let's take a step back and into both of your terms in office. You were number 67, you were number 68. As you reflect back on your time leading this state, what do you hope people remember about your term as the cornerstone, your accomplishment, your key reason for being in that office? He's deferring to you.
Well, I had the great privilege of being the chief executive of this state during the Great Depression. And I tell people I'm glad about that.
The Great Recession.
The Great Recession. Well, it was a depression for many of us. Because I felt that during that period of time, I managed the affairs of this state in a way that prepared it for recovery. And I had to make a lot of tough decisions. And I remember one weekend, we were at that, with my staff at the governor's residence, Governor, and tax revenues were falling, and the governor has the responsibility to maintain a balanced budget. And so we had a whiteboard up on the wall, and I had my staff there, and we were going through the budget piece by piece, trying to identify whatever we could cut to save some money. And I won't go into all the details, but when I became governor, I said Medicaid is going to cover home health oxygen for people who need oxygen in their homes. It's not required, wasn't required benefit, but it was one that I thought was important. And we came down the line, and someone said, well, there's oxygen. And I said, no, we're not going to go there. We're not going to take oxygen away from people. But those are the kinds of decisions that had to be made. And so if there's one thing that I'm most proud of, and I'm proud of a lot of things, quite frankly, but is that I managed the state in difficult times, and I did it in a way that I felt was as fair and balanced as it could possibly be.
You know, as we look back at that time, I remember when you were running for re-election, one of, the blame for the recession was put at your door here in Ohio. Of course, it was put at a Republican's door in Washington. In hindsight, it should have been put at Wall Street's door. And as you look at that now, does it make you bitter, knowing that there is an acceptance now that this crisis was caused by the people who were supposed to be our economic and financial experts?
Well, I'm certainly not bitter, but I don't want to dominate the conversation because I want this guy to have to speak up and assume some responsibility for what he did. But for example, when Francis and I moved into the governor's residence, it was a long way from the chicken house that I had lived in previously. The people in charge of the residence said, your bathroom is kind of antiquated, and it was. There was a wash basin about this size and so on and so forth. We're going to remodel your bathroom. And I said, no, you're not. We're not going to spend money on your bathroom, on my bathroom. So I went to Lowe's. I bought a can of paint myself, and I painted that bathroom by myself on a Thanksgiving weekend. And here I go running for office, and there's this ad with this gold toilet. Maybe some of you remember it, with money going down the toilet, and it said Ted Strickland spent, I think, $300 and some thousand to remodel his bathroom. Well, this man's responsible for those bathrooms. Let me no. Let me tell you the truth. Before I became governor, this man, to his credit, probably encouraged by hope, wanted to have public handicapped accessible bathrooms available to the 20,000 or so people who visited the governor's residence every year. So they created they set aside money to create bathrooms, not in the governor's residence, wasn't my bathroom. So, am I bitter about that? You damn right I am bitter about that.
Well, it's your chance to answer for that, Bob Taft.
Well, I'm glad you asked about my accomplishments. I brought this little book called The Taft Years right here. This has everything good that happened during my administration. None of the bad stuff, just the good stuff. And by the way, we have many copies of this if any of you would like to have one of those. Some things that I hope people remember: school rebuilding, Third Frontier, Clean Ohio Fund, and the tax reform package that we had. But one thing I do want to mention, because Ted was involved in this too, and Kate Barter, who is my chief policy advisor, is here today, but we spent 4 years negotiating with all the other Great Lakes governors and Ontario and Quebec a Great Lakes Compact to protect the waters of the Great Lakes from diversion to the southwest, to Saudi Arabia, wherever they were trying to do that. And Kate and Sam, I provided some leadership as chair of the Council of Great Lakes Governors, but Kate and Sam just did an incredible job working with the Native American groups. We had to work with them, with everybody. It was diplomacy, international diplomacy. We got it done, and that has now been implemented into law. It's a compact, interstate compact, approved by the Congress, and I want to say that Taft Strickland was instrumental in promoting and advocating for the legislation to implement that compact, and he was so gracious that when the bill passed and he had to sign it, he invited me to come up to the signing ceremony. Democrat governor, Republican governor, and allowed me to participate in that honor.
It reminds me of something, because right after I became governor, I was invited to a ribbon cutting for this highway project over toward Indiana, right? I had absolutely nothing to do with it. I'd been governor a few weeks. And I remember saying at that meeting, you know, the person who ought to be here is Bob Taft, because he's the one that shepherded this project to completion. And so I really respect this governor. Francis and I talk frequently about Bob Taft and Hope Taft, and the fact that he's a Republican, I'm a Democrat, he's a conservative, I'm a liberal, but I want to tell you, we recognize quality when we experience it with people, and the state of Ohio is really fortunate to have had these two people as the leaders of our state.
Just to follow up on that, yeah, I just want to follow up and say I'm very, very grateful for the friendship that Francis and Hope and Ted and I have developed over the years. And Democrats can talk to Republicans, can get along, can do good things together. It's very possible.
You know, Governor Taft, this might be my interpretation, but I remember when you were in office, I sometimes had the sense that you loved to govern, that you loved to lead, but you hated politics.
Yeah.
Am I misinterpreting that?
Well, I am a policy wonk, so yeah, I like governing. I was working in governing before I got into politics. So I really enjoy that, and I miss the ability to have an influence on public policy. Campaigning is fine. I won't miss the fundraising at all. That's the hardest part of it. You know, you've got to spend so much time raising money for a state like Ohio. I do like meeting people. I like traveling Ohio. I loved, going to, the Ohio River down to country where Ted came from and Northeast Ohio. We're a really diverse and fascinating state. So I really loved getting out to the small towns, the large cities, the urban areas, the rural areas, and that was fun. Campaigning was stressful. Debates were stressful, and fundraising was a pain in the ass.
On the same token, I always got the feeling that you liked the politics of it.
Are you implying that I didn't like governing?
No, I'm saying
I
you seem to like both sides of it.
I love the politics. Frances has said to me in the past that sometimes she thinks I enjoyed running for office more than I enjoyed being in office. But I find, maybe it's because I was a psychologist before I got into this, I just find people incredibly fascinating. So I enjoy that. But can we talk about something that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, it depends on what it is.
Guns.
Yeah, actually, this was
Can we
going to
talk about
be
guns?
my next topic, and I will tell you why. As you each sit where you are now and look at the decisions that Governor DeWine is trying to make now with his 17-point plan, trying to do something about guns, and Governor, you, with the time that you are now in Dayton, with the shooting that happened there, my question to each of you on this, if you were in that office this day, today, what would you be working for when it comes to guns in Ohio? And we're backed by the NRA. You're known to be a gun owner. And
let me make a public confession here. I used to belong to the NRA. And thank you for not throwing chairs. The fact is that when Governor DeWine came out with his plan, I sent him a text message. And I thanked him for doing that. And I said, Governor, regardless of what the final outcome is of the proposals you put forth, you have shown wisdom and courage, and I thank you for that. About 40,000 people a year in this country are killed as a result of guns. More than half of those are suicides. Something's got to be done. You know, when 9/11 happened, and 3,000 or 3,500 people were killed, we changed. And one of the ways we changed is how we fly. You know, I used to fly to Washington nearly every week. I'd go to the airport minutes before the plane was scheduled to leave. I'd go running down the corridor yelling for the staff to hold the door. You know, I'd run on the plane, I'd sit down, I'd be panting and so on. I can't do that anymore. And I can't do that because our fellow citizens were killed, and we decided to impose some restrictions upon ourselves in order to have our public to be safe. And I don't want to take guns away from people. I just want people to use guns safely. And we ought to be willing to put some restrictions upon ourselves. Background checks, smart guns, whatever is necessary. We have a slaughter happening in this country. And it's time that we got really serious about doing something about it. And I applaud Governor DeWine for having the courage to listen to the people in Dayton, and he came back to Columbus, and he's trying to do something about it.
Well, let me ask you this. You mentioned you are no longer a member of the NRA. Why are you no longer a member of the NRA?
Well, I think the NRA, I've changed over the years, but I also think the NRA has changed over the years. The NRA used to be primarily a supporter of sports activities, sportsmen and so on. The NRA at one time used to support background checks. But I think the NRA has become very radicalized. I think it's an extreme organization, and I don't think it's concerned about gun owners primarily. I think it's concerned about gun manufacturers and an element within our country that I perceive to be dangerous.
And if I could ask you as well about if you were in the office today and the Dayton shooting happened, the mass shooting culture that we've developed, we have children, kindergarten kids carrying bulletproof backpacks to school. What would be your action at this point?
Well, I communicated with Governor DeWine's chief of staff, commending the governor for his package of proposals, and I support those strongly, and I give him a lot of credit for trying to lead on this issue. I mean, I think there's strong support, even among Republicans, among Democrats, for a really tight background check system, for bans on assault weapons, for red flag laws like what the governor is proposing. Now is the time for leadership. The governor of Ohio is providing it, and let's just pray that the president of the United States also provides that leadership, because it's time to get something done. There's too much tragedy. There's strong support for doing something, and there's no reason not to proceed.
Do you see this legislature, which is in a gerrymandered state, being willing to take action on the plan laid out by the governor?
I certainly hope they will. I mean, I hope they'll work with the governor on reasonable restrictions like what the governor has proposed, because I think that's in the interest of Ohioans, recognizing that this is a national problem too, and we need national action.
Yes, and I think we need to look at gun violence as a public health issue and try to move away from the pro-gun, anti-gun argument that takes us nowhere, but just look at this issue as to what it's doing to our people, our safety, our public health. You know, there was a time when a lot of people died in car accidents, without that being necessary. And we decided, wait a minute, let's stop looking at the driver, let's start looking at the car. What can we do to make the car safer? So we instituted airbags and seat belts and shatterproof windshields and so on and so forth. Maybe we ought to be thinking about guns in that way. What can we, there are smart guns where only the person who owns the gun can shoot it. And that would provide some safety, provide, keep a lot of tragedies from happening. We had a situation here in Ohio not long ago. I think it was the child of a highway patrol officer who had the gun in his home, and the child killed himself. And if that had been a smart gun, if it had been a gun that only that officer could have fired, then that child would be alive today. So there are things that we can do without confiscating all guns, just to try to make the guns that do exist to be safer. It wouldn't solve all the problem. No issue, no silver bullet's going to solve all the problems, but there are things that we can do that should not threaten the Second Amendment rights of any citizen, but make it less likely that we're going to have death and injury.
I know, moving on to another topic, I know you are from Appalachia, I'm from Appalachia, place where there are many guns, but also a place where right now there's a lot of opioids. Not only Appalachia, but some of the cities. This state is in crisis. It's the second worst state in the country for opioid overdoses. What should the governor, what should the legislature be doing now about that crisis?
This is going to sound like I'm a cheerleader for Mike DeWine, and I hope my Democratic friends forgive me for this. But the governor, shortly after becoming governor, developed a commission, which he asked me to be a part of, to really look at the whole mental health opioid treatment thing. There's a lot that can be done. Primarily, medically assisted treatment. Make treatment available wherever it's needed. It's going to cost some money. It's going to change. We need to change the way we think about drugs and addiction as a, not as a moral failure. We need to have laws that reflect that. We need to put resources that are consistent with the seriousness of the problem. There's a whole lot that can be done. I was in Southern Ohio this week visiting a relative, and he said to me, "You smell that smell?" And I said, "Yeah, what is that?" And he said, "I think it's meth cooking." Think of that. Those things are happening. There needs to be enforcement. There needs to be treatment, and education. We need everything. This is a real serious problem. Every family is affected. If there's any family that thinks they're immune from this, you need to change your thinking, because it affects every demographic group, every ethnic, racial group, every, religion doesn't protect you from this scourge. It's a monumental challenge for our society.
It's a real crisis, isn't it, Governor?
It's a huge crisis, and one that I guess was just developing when I was in office, which was quite a while ago. But I think the state has done a good job of cracking down on the pill mills, and the physician practicing policies in certain parts of the state, and also on the pharmacists as well. I hope that as these lawsuits proceed against those who share responsibility for the crisis, as that money comes down, I hope that those resources will be devoted to address the problem through research into safe painkillers, research into the best treatment practices, and also to help with treatment programs throughout the state of Ohio. That's where the money should go. I remember when I was governor, we had the tobacco settlement. We used it for a lot of different things. Some of it we used for smoking cessation. But then, unfortunately, that fell by the wayside, which I think was too bad, because that's another remains a huge public health issue in Ohio. The incidence of smoking, the impact on the cost of health care and just health in our state.
You know, that makes me think, and by the way, in about 5 minutes, we're going to be taking some questions from the audience. If you'd like to think about your questions, and you can be lining up over there as we normally do. But before I finish, I want to ask each of you, you mentioned, that money, that should stay where it belongs. After leaving office, you became the armchair quarterback. How difficult was it to sit back at times and watch the way Ohio was being run and not say, I wouldn't have done that? I mean, of course, I'm not talking about the person who followed you, but what public policies?
Go ahead, Governor.
What public policies?
I got broad shoulders.
did you watch unfold, or even today, that you think, I wish I could control that. I wish I had the power to change that.
Well, there's a secret little group of governors. We never criticize each other. But I think we do owe respect for the office and for those governors that come in. But I've done some advocacy with the legislature, particularly on Great Lakes issues and career education issues that I really am passionate about. Hope does a lot of advocacy on prairies and wildflowers and the issues that she's concerned about. So we're out of office and we may be armchair quarterbacks, but we're also citizens, and we have the ability to participate and try to influence public policy, nothing like what we did have. But we can have an impact, and I do find that people still return my phone calls.
Well, that's good to hear. And Governor, how about you? Is there anything that you've watched and said, I would be doing that differently?
Can I take the Fifth Amendment?
No.
To be honest, I'm not going to mention anything, but there have been things when I've said, but listen, it's a tough job. It really is. And, Ohio's a big, diverse state, as the governor has said. And it's like being a governor of Ohio is like being mayor of 100 cities or something, because they're all different. They all got their own ideas about how things ought to be done. There's so many interest groups. So, I mean, it's a tough job. It really is.
Well, I know, Governor, you work with young people at the University of Dayton, and you have also along the way mentored and helped a lot of young people. Are you optimistic about the future of politics and government, or are you looking at the divisive nature of the national conversation right now and having trouble being optimistic?
I do everything I can to encourage students at the University of Dayton to participate and consider careers in state government if they're interested in public policy. There are great opportunities in Ohio state government right now. We have an internship program. It's in its 10th year. We send 12 students every year. A lot of those students are now, working in state government for the governor's office or, Department of Public Safety, Department of Veterans Affairs, legislative offices. I think there's wonderful opportunities. They're great opportunities to influence public policy, and I'm more pessimistic about the inability of the federal government to address the major issues that are facing our nation than I am about state government here in Ohio.
And how about you? Are you optimistic, pessimistic?
I fluctuate back and forth, depending on the news cycle, quite frankly. I believe that this country is resilient. I believe our democracy is resilient. We've gone through a lot. I remember the time of the Vietnam War and the upheaval and the polarization that took place there. The polarization today seems a little different than that, though. It seems more, I don't know, it seems like we are becoming increasingly selfish in our political dialogue. And there's less talk about the common good. And that's problematic. Will we survive? Yes. Will we have some difficult times between now and the future? Yeah, I think we will have.
It's almost time for public questions, but I want to ask you one real quick question, because it seems that the squad led by AOC in Washington has become almost what the Tea Party was to the Republican Party a few years ago. An arm of the party that's pushing it farther to the extremes. There's right now a young woman challenging Joyce Beatty, who you would think would be in a safe seat, one of the bluest districts in the state, but someone backed by that organization challenging Joyce Beatty. Is your party being pushed farther to the left than you would expect or want it to be at this point?
Well, I consider myself pretty much of a lefty, but I also consider myself a pragmatist. You know, I want everybody to have health care. That doesn't mean that I think, thank you. That doesn't mean that I think we ought to abandon private insurance and go to a Medicare for all. I'm more in the Joe Biden camp than I am the Bernie Sanders camp. Political dialogue is healthy. Debates are healthy, debates can actually move people. I've moved in my life from one position to another position. As I've come to know more and experience more and learn more. And that can happen through healthy political debate. That's different than name calling and just
finger pointing.
Finger pointing, yeah. I don't know. It seems as if we have lost a level of civility that makes honest debate very difficult.
All right, we're going to go on, and I'm going to ask you to ask your question and introduce yourself first.
Right. Good evening, Governor Taft and Governor Strickland. I'm Kathy Fox. You've both commented positively on Governor DeWine's plan in response to the mass shooting in Dayton. What advice would you give to Governor DeWine, both in terms of don't ever try this or absolutely do that? And all subjects are open.
It's a tough question. As Kate will remember, when I was governor, we promoted a safe storage law for guns. We had a Republican legislator introduce that bill, and we did the best we could to sell it. Obviously, it wasn't successful. The NRA, the gun lobby came in and just immobilized any effort to get that bill through. So I think, Governor DeWine's been around for a long time. I'm not sure he needs advice from us, but he's going to have to work very hard. He's going to have to expend a lot of political capital. If he wants to make it happen, it's going to have to be the major issue. And he's really going to have to call out all the chips. He's going to have to influence a lot of Republicans. Hopefully, maybe a lot of Democrat votes might be for the program naturally, but he's going to really have to work. He's going to have to work, mano o mano, woman o womano, every way to go. He's going to have to. He's going to have to do personal lobbying, personal persuasion. I wouldn't call it arm twisting, but whatever influence or power that he has. We've had bills that were tough to get through, and it's grassroots. Grassroots effort, and then, you know, there's a normal strategy that some of the experts here in the room are aware of in terms of mobilizing local constituencies across Ohio and building grassroots support, that the kind of support that might resonate with, say, recalcitrant members on the issue.
And Governor, what would your advice be?
Well, you know, I think Governor DeWine may be in the same position that a lot of Republicans find themselves in when they take a step like that. Richard Nixon went to China. A Democrat could never have gone to China. Remember that error in our history, you know? But Richard Nixon did because he was viewed as someone that the conservatives could trust. And they wouldn't have trusted a liberal Democrat going over there, but they did trust Richard Nixon because they knew of his anti-communist positions, so on and so forth. So I think Governor DeWine is in a position to do some things that maybe a Democratic governor couldn't do when it comes to this particular issue. And so I would encourage, I would encourage Democrats to show support for his efforts, but I would also encourage a lot of my Republican friends who believe that reasonable efforts to control guns and the death resulting from gun violence could actually, work, and Ohio could become really a leader, a national leader in taking a step like that.
Thank you for your question.
I'm Fred Looper, Diedenthal and Logan. A very thoughtful and brilliant Federal Court of Appeals judge from Columbus, Jeff Sutton, has written a book, the thesis of which, to the extent I can understand him, is we might as well write off Congress. They are too polarized to ever do anything, but we should hope that state legislatures can do what the federal government can't. What's your prognosis for the governor getting any of his gun control proposals through? You've said the methods, but you haven't predicted the success, or since 90% of the people in the country support sensible gun legislation, what can we do to help our state legislators get on the right side of this issue?
Personal grassroots lobbying, it does matter in terms of communicating with your member of the state legislature, and showing the governor your support. I mean, the governor, whether or not it happens, it'll depend in part on how much effort and advocacy the governor is willing to put in to the issue. That's not the only criteria for its enactment, but when we had an issue that we were passionate about, I would travel Ohio, go to every media market in the state, talk about it, advocate for it, show support for the issue in terms of local grassroots support in the district of a legislator who might be recalcitrant about something. So it depends, and I know he's very serious about it, and I wish him well, but it's hard to have a crystal ball to know what will happen right now.
And would you like to answer that question, too?
I agree with what the governor said.
Okay. And sir?
Hi, I'm AJ Burt. A few years ago, New York Times Gallup organization conducted the largest survey of LGBTQ folks in the country, and found that Central Ohio had the top 15 LGBT populations in the country. I work with our local LGBT employee resource group at Cover My Meds, and we are fortunate to work in the city of Columbus, where our rights are protected, but that is not consistent with the state of Ohio. It's possible for somebody, again, one of the top 15 largest populations in the country here in Columbus, to live here and work here in Central Ohio and not have the same protected rights. So as a young leader who is doing a lot and really trying to do a lot to build a better community around this, what is your advice to both executives and folks like myself who are just getting involved to really try and make change? And I'm specifically referring to LGBTQ folks and sexual orientation.
Well, I'm really proud of the fact that Columbus, Ohio is viewed, I think, as one of the most inclusive cities in America, perhaps, when it comes to the gay and lesbian transgender community. I'm really pleased that after Governor DeWine became governor, in those early morning hours, he signed an executive order protecting LGBT communities, and he specifically included protections for the trans community. So I think a lot of communities can learn a lot from Columbus, and I think that's a real positive for this city. I think it's one of the reasons that it's the kind of growing progressive city that it is, because of the leadership that the city has given, and the way that the gay community has become a part of the structure of this community, the governing structure of this community.
I would just say, if we're going to be successful as a state, we really have to cultivate human talent to the maximum possible extent, and that means we need to be inclusive of all groups and send that message, and that would include the community that you're referring to. Also, immigrants as well. Dayton is an immigrant-friendly city, for example. I know you have a lot of immigrants here too, but the number one issue in Ohio is where are we going to get the young talent to grow our state? And Columbus is doing very well. It's really a model that can be, I think, held up to other communities around the state.
I think if I were governor now, I would want to put a sign in the entrance to Ohio, immigrants welcome. Ohio needs that kind of infusion of energy and talent and so on. We are losing congressional representation in Ohio because we're growing a little bit, but we're not growing nearly as rapidly as the states in the South and the Southwest are. And I would love to have an infusion of immigrants from around the world into our state. I think it would make us a stronger, more prosperous state if we were to do that.
Thank you for that question. Sir?
Hi, my name is Jerry Rampelt. Hello, Bob, Ted. Question for you. My view of the two of you, knowing both of you, is that you essentially played the game between the 25-yard lines. And so you play the game in that 50 yards. I'd like your comment. What do you make of the Ohio House and the coalition that they have there now?
There you go. I didn't get that.
The Ohio House, the coalition?
Well, I was shocked that the Speaker was elected with as many Democrat votes as Republican votes. That's an extraordinary development, and hopefully it bodes well for bipartisanship. That's all I can say. I don't follow the legislature closely enough to know, is it truly operating in that spirit or not? But it's pretty unprecedented. I'm not sure how healthy it is if you have two persons, say, running for Speaker of the House or President of the Senate, and they're both going out and recruiting their own candidates in districts to run against each other in primaries, and that then builds a whole new calculus into the local election process, and I'm a little concerned about that.
Yeah, were you surprised at the number of Democrats who voted for Larry Householder?
Not really, because deals were made, and I think many of us knew what those deals were. But the one thing we haven't talked about this evening that impacts this question and every other question is gerrymandering, and the fact that we do have a serious problem. And I hope that this is dealt with nationwide, because that's one of the primary reasons that we have this polarization, don't you think? You know, the more conservative you can get, the better. The more liberal you can get, the better. And then you only have to worry about primary challenges, and the citizens basically really don't have the ability to choose the person they want to represent them. That's all that's decided by the district boundaries, and it's really unfortunate.
Yeah, it's the candidates choosing the voters instead of the other way around.
One additional thought on that, I do remember the days of Vern Rife, Speaker Vern Rife, with incredible power, and for a while there was a guy named Corwin Nixon, who was the minority leader, and he was like the best friend of Vern Rife. And so that was a strange kind of relationship, and everybody was working with Vern Rife, and you know, if you believe strongly, bipartisanship is great, collaboration is great, but if you believe strongly in the two-party system, and one party, the party out of power holding the party in power accountable, then maybe you've got some issues with the current arrangement.
Yeah.
And one final question.
Kurt Steiner, Steiner Public Relations. Question is, if you were returned to the office, you know, and I mean, I think that even though you may not do that, you may have thought about that. You know, what would I do if I went back?
Laughing up here.
Would you do something differently? You know, is there something that you wish you would have gotten to? You know, that kind of thing. Was there something is there anything like that that you would do differently if you did it over again?
Yeah, Ted had the Great Recession, which is a huge challenge. We had a minor recession in the early 2000s, and so you know we had to cut spending across the board. And as you remember, Kurt, Governor Voinovich initiated a strong early childhood program, and we ended up going along with the legislature and reducing that. I regret that we did that. I think early childhood support is so important, and the state is doing a lot more now. Governor DeWine has worked hard on that. That's number one. Number two, we were not as observant as we should have been with regard to the early development of charter schools in Ohio. We were focused on the DeRolf school funding decision. We were focused on public education, building school buildings in response to DeRolf, reading, high academic standards and so forth. So we really, and charter schools were developing at that time, and we didn't have the quality control that we needed on charter schools. And as a result, Ohio has still, even to this day, they haven't all been weeded out, a lot of low-quality charter schools. We have some good ones. We have some great ones here in Columbus, Dayton, elsewhere. But we should have done a much better job early on in Ohio, collectively, all of us, the legislature, the governor, and this is hindsight, making sure that the operators were good, the academic quality was high, and really working to develop that option as a strong option for Ohio.
Governor, looking back?
If I were to be governor today, I would try to do what I've always wanted to do, and that's say whatever I wanted to say. And not that I lied. I always tried to, you know, to be honest. But getting back to the death penalty, if I were governor today, I would call for a moratorium on the death penalty, and let the chips fall where they, you know, where they may.
Well, please join me in thanking both of these men for being so candid and
Absolutely.
thank you. You did a really good job. Thank you so much. Thank you all.
How special was that? Thank our lovely First Ladies for joining us. They said they had an interest in the program tonight. Wow. I mean, I'm never speechless, but this has really been very, very special, and I've been through a lot of CMC forums, believe me, so thank you so much. Help me thank our sponsors, the Dispatch Media Group, Plant Moran, Bricker and Eckler, American Dairy Association Mideast, and Honda, who will be back here next week because we'll be celebrating Honda's 40-year impact on Ohio. And obviously, before we go, one more thanks again to our lovely Colleen Marshall and our governors. Thank you so much for being here.